She comes over and she has her phone on a selfie stick and she, kind of gives me a motion like I assume she wanted to get her picture taken with me. So I posed and then all of a sudden she starts moving me around like crazy. And it went on for quite some time. And I'm like, what in the world is going on here? I was laughing. I didn't care. And we stop. She stops and gives me the 1 minute signal and does something on her phone and then plays it back. She made a music video out of it that she and this American, in Tiananmen Square.
Welcome to the Where Have You Been podcast. I'm your host, Bill Ream, and each week on the pod, I have conversations with incredible guests from all walks of life. Expect to hear funny, crazy, emotional, life-changing, and even sometimes life-threatening stories and experiences that will entertain and inspire you. As always, I appreciate your likes, subscriptions, ratings, and reviews wherever you are listening. It doesn't sound like much, but it truly helps the pod get to the ears of more people who may enjoy it. And check out the website, whybpodcast.com, for links to the socials where you can find pictures from the guests and their stories. And also buy merch if you're so inclined. Now let's get to this week's episode. Thank you for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in, of course, again to another episode of, well, you know what it is because you're on the site or on the app, and it's the Where Have You Been podcast. My name is Bill Ream, your host, of course, and I'll say it again as I do every single week. I have, well, not just one, but two fantastic guests. They do happen to know each other, so that's a positive. But I have two fantastic guests with us today. I have Anne and John. I have the wonderful documentarians and authors and world travelers, which is also a benefit for our podcast. So without further ado, I will welcome you both to the podcast. And if you don't mind telling our listeners, Anne and John, who are you?
Well, hello, and thanks for having us.
That's Anne, by the way.
Thank you for the clarification.
So we are people who met in broadcasting. That is actually our background. I have 30 plus years in broadcasting, as does John.
And for me, it's all been pretty much radio, but Anne was in television and radio here in Indianapolis, Indiana.
And I was actually inducted into the Indiana Broadcasters Association Hall of Fame in 2019. And once our broadcasting career sort of started to peter out, is that a good way of putting it?
Sure.
Because broadcasting is an industry in flux even now. And so we just got entrepreneurial, and I have owned quite a few businesses, including a magazine and, a mortgage business and all kinds of stuff. But the one that we bought 15 years ago, I bought into a travel agency because of our love for travel. And we've been doing that for, like I said, about 15 years now. And we got into the business because we love travel.
That's right. And we've been married for almost 31 years now and have been traveling the world together that whole time. And as Anne mentioned, we've been traveling already, and so we had a love of travel, and so getting into the travel business made sense about 15 years ago.
And my personal love for travel dates back to my childhood. I visited 49 of the 50 states with my parents. They were very much into travel, and I even went abroad on a Bible-related trip when I was a teenager. And then at 19, I married my first husband, and 2 days later moved to Tehran, Iran, where I lived for a year and a half. And I've actually written a book about that. And so then, didn't travel quite as much because I had children. And then when John and I got together 30 some odd years ago, we started traveling together, and we've been doing it ever since. And it's kind of on steroids at times.
That's wonderful. Can you guys tell me a little bit and tell the listeners a little bit about where people can find you, and tell us a little bit about kind of what you have going on now with, you're still doing obviously all the travels and everything, but with you have a wonderful documentary that you've put out there and a fantastic book, and where can people find that stuff and like your webpage and such?
Sure. It was back in 2019. We took a journey on the Trans-Siberian Railway that went from Moscow through Mongolia to Beijing, China. We made a documentary about that. That is available on YouTube for free, Journey on the Trans-Siberian Railway. But our most recent effort has been writing a book about all of our travels called Travel is No Vacation, a Love Story. And information about that is available at travelisnovacation.com.
Excellent. Awesome. So one of the things I usually ask once we get to that point, to this point, is how did travel become a thing in your life? Well, Anne, you kind of already sort of answered that, but John, can I ask you the same question? Like, was it something that started when you were a kid, or did that start to kind of happen as you got older?
On the contrary, yeah, it wasn't until Anne and I got together. I had been outside the United States exactly once before Ann and I got married. And it was one of those day trip things that a company in Indianapolis used to do back in the 80s. And it was a one-day trip to the Bahamas. That was the extent of my international travel until Ann and I got married. I literally had not been outside the United States, didn't even have a passport, I don't think.
And so 120 countries, all 7 continents later, here we are.
In 30 years, wow. And I feel like a day trip to the Bahamas is sort of like, what a tease.
Yeah, well,
here you are, here's paradise, and now go home.
Yeah. Now, I had been to Hawaii, I think, prior to that, but, that's American paradise. But those day trips to the Bahamas, it was just people from the Midwest trying to get out of the cold or something, and going down there, women would get their hair braided, and men would go to the casinos and lay on the beach for a couple of hours, and that was it.
And I might add that I believe he won it.
That's entirely true. That's entirely possible. Yeah.
So our radio station was part of a rather large company, and there were a bunch of radio stations. And I think we had some party, or we had a meeting, or we had something going on, and they drew for this day trip to the Bahamas, and John won. And so that's how he got out of the country.
So this international travel was not even necessarily something that I was seeking out. I was perfectly fine just cooling my jets here in the Midwest.
Well, he's an Illinois boy, and I'm from Kentucky, and we met in Indianapolis. So there you go.
Nice. Well, I love it. And I love your voices, that doesn't go away just because you leave the industry. And being a fellow radio alum myself, I feel like almost like we're 3 peas in a pod, although I did not spend nearly as long in the industry as the two of you did. But so this is the point of the episode. I'm just going to jump right in and ask you both, Anne and John, where have you been? And I'd like to kind of start, if you don't mind me starting with, and feel free to kind of list off some of the places. I know, like you just named basically the entire world. But John, do you remember like was it the very first international trip that you took with Anne that kind of like, aha? Or do you remember what trip that was that really did it for you? It's like, I have to keep doing this.
I remember it like it was yesterday, and I'm sort of getting chills just thinking about it now, because we write about it in the book as well. Our first international trip, I don't count our honeymoon cruise in the Caribbean. That's just silly. The real first one was our first anniversary, and we flew to Paris and then to England. So Paris was my real introduction to international travel. And we flew in, took the transfer shuttle bus, whatever it is, from the airport into Paris. And I remember this like it was yesterday, came around a corner, and I think they dropped us off or something, and we made a change at the Arc de Triomphe.
And I remember looking over at him. We're on this big bus. I looked at him and he had tears in his eyes.
It was, it was one of these things where your whole life in movies or in books or whatever, you see these landmarks, whether it's the Arc de Triomphe or the Eiffel Tower or Big Ben or the Great Wall of China or whatever. And, oh, wow, that's really cool. When you see this stuff, or at least when I was seeing this stuff for the first time, it was an emotional experience. It was literally breathtaking. And it was that way very much for the first few years as we were traveling, going to Paris and London and Athens and Rome and Venice. And it was just every time someplace new was it was just so exciting and so emotional to see these places in person. There's nothing like seeing them in person.
And I would say that there are other times that we've gotten emotional. So we saw the Northern Lights in Iceland a few years back, and we both got emotional about that. There are things that I think you can't believe you're seeing, and they're so beautiful and inspiring and whatever that it kind of chokes you up a little bit that you're lucky enough to be standing there seeing it. And we've had other moments, and we may get to this story from Cambodia where something happened that brought tears to our eyes, and many other instances that we could probably go through. But that is the beauty of really great travel. It can be emotional. It can be something that brings you to tears almost because it is such a great thing you're seeing and being a part of. And so that was our first. That was
So yeah, so
international trip.
to get back to your actual question, yes, that was my, as you would say, my aha moment, and I had many aha moments. We've both had them over the years.
Yeah, sure. And that's kind of like it's not the same, but like in my mind I'm thinking like, oh, it's like the great golf shot. Like, okay, even if I've done some travel that's ho hum, when you see something that's just so beautiful, it keeps you going and keeps you wanting to do it. And so like, and I also want to mention, we've mentioned this before too. It doesn't matter how many pictures you see. It doesn't matter how many stories you hear or videos you watch. It's never the same. It just can't
Absolutely.
compare.
Nope, nope. You stand there and you're seeing it in person. It's usually bigger, better. Taj Mahal is a great example of that. You see so many pictures of it. It's iconic. Everybody, children know probably what the Taj Mahal is. It's the most beautiful
Mhm.
building in the world. But when you're literally standing in front of it and you see all these gems, because that's how it's carved, and there are gems in it all around, and that beautiful white marble, and it is just breathtaking, and especially when you realize that it's sitting there amongst a lot of poverty, and yet it's got such unbelievable, immeasurable value. And so I think that there are moments like that where you think, well, I've seen this, but it looks so much better in real life.
Yeah. And then add to that, what you cannot, no matter what you try to do, you cannot get is the smells and the true sounds being surrounded by, being really in the moment. And
I
yeah, it's just wonderful.
I think there are sounds. If you were to run through a cacophony of sounds, and they're from different cities, I think it's entirely possible to be able to identify what city that might be. And smells, there are smells that will take me back to somewhere. Tehran had a very distinctive smell, and there are moments that I have had where something that reminds me of it when we're in that part of the world, that triggers a response, because again, it's one of your senses being jogged, jogging your memory with your senses.
Yeah. I think it's what I was going to ask you. I'm glad you expanded on that to say that it does happen to you because I
Oh
was going to
yeah.
ask if every once in a while, you just like all of a sudden out of nowhere, you're just thrown back into a place. And I think that's another part of the beauty of what travel is. And I don't have any sort of agenda as far as like a place to go next or a destination to talk about specifically. You mentioned Cambodia. Unless you have somewhere else you'd like to take us, did you want to? I'd hate to forget that.
Sure, we would love to take you to Cambodia. Cambodia, I think, is one of my favorites. And we hit it on we have this theory of travel that John calls while we're in the neighborhood. And so we see all these things while we're near things that we see, go to other countries. One time we did Brazil to for Carnival, and wound up going to Machu Picchu because it's on the same continent. And that's why he dubbed it while we're in the neighborhood. Well, this particular trip, we went around the world. So it was a really big neighborhood. We started in Delhi, New Delhi, India. We went from India to Tibet, Tibet to Vietnam, Vietnam to Cambodia, Cambodia to Singapore. So we went out going east, and we came back from the west. So we did a complete around the world thing. And so Cambodia was certainly by far my favorite stop on that trip. Although I love Tibet, I really did like Tibet. But the people of Cambodia are so sweet and really genuinely nice people. And Angkor Wat is an all-time. I'm into ruins, and so Angkor Wat being the largest temple complex in the world, and it was found in a jungle basically. And in some places, some parts of it are being overtaken by the jungle. There are trees growing out of it, and it is something that again you'd have to see to believe. And it's just a wonderful sight.
And while we were there, we had a guide with us, and we were driving down a rural road, and we saw some of these local houses, which are essentially just little huts, practically 10 by 10 square foot huts on stilts. And they were interesting. And so we asked our guide if we could pull over and get some pictures of one of the houses. So he pulled us over at a spot on the road where someone was cooking something along the side of the road. And we went back to one of the houses, and there was a man sitting there in his home, little Cambodian man. His wife was in the other room, which was essentially just, a few feet away from him. And she was weaving mats that they sleep on. So through our guide as an interpreter, we asked the man if we could see his home and take pictures. He said yes. And so we spent, maybe 5-10 minutes there taking pictures of his house, his room and and him. And when we were done, we asked our guide if we could give this man, $5 as a thank you for allowing us into his home. Guide said yes. So we gave the man $5. He hadn't been wearing a shirt. He was just home for the afternoon. Well, when we gave him the money, he immediately got up and put a shirt on, ran out to the street where someone was cooking something. Turns out that it was his daughter who was cooking sugar cane that they grow near there. And what they do is they make sugar candy for the tourists and sell it to the tourists. He had her wrap up in these little handmade weaved packages some of this candy to give to us because we gave him $5. We gave him $5 as a thank you, but he wouldn't accept that $5 without giving us something in return.
And when we realized that, it was like, he won't take the money unless he gives us something. And what he had already given us was of unbelievable value to us. And, we're sitting in the back seat of the car as we're pulling away, and we looked at each other and we both had tears in our eyes. It was so sweet. And the pictures that we took, one picture, and John took it. We actually are photographers, and we've exhibited our photography over the years in quite a few places in our area. And one of our all-time favorite pictures, and it's this man sitting in his home on the floor and with shirtless, and it's in black and white. And he's got this radiant smile, and he's just beautiful. And, we look at that picture and go, it takes you back. Another one of those moments of oh, wow, that we couldn't redo that if we had to. It was just a wonderful experience.
Yeah. And frankly, by our standards, certainly, this is someone who has virtually nothing in the world. His entire world was this small hut and his wife and children. And that was all he had, but he couldn't accept the $5 without giving us something. And it was just remarkable.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And it's a reminder that, and we've talked about this on the podcast before too, that, people, no matter where you are in the world, you can't just assume that people are necessarily wanting, I guess, for lack of a better term. They are living within their means, they're living their lives, and this is what they know, and they don't want handouts, even though
exactly.
We as Americans would think, oh my gosh, well, they need. Well, no, not if they're happy.
Right. And yes, I agree. There is a lot of poverty there. And another further story about Cambodia and our time there. During this visit, our guide, his name was Seth, and he was great. A young guy. His father had been a translator English during their side of the Vietnam War. They also had went through war for like 30 years or something crazy. And one day his father didn't come home. So the Khmer Rouge must have abducted him. So in any event, really great English and very nice. And we're at this one site and we see a well, and over the well is this big wood sign that has professionally done. It's got a family name on it, and they were from like California, and they had donated the well. And we said, what is this? And he said, well, people see how the people of Cambodia live, and that they don't have clean drinking water in a lot of places. And so they donate to dig a well so that they have water. And we said, we want to do that. And so the next day, he took us to a site that was given to the poor and disabled free to live on. And there were a lot of makeshift homes and huts and that kind of thing. And we walked around the area to pick a place, a site to dig the well. And the people started following us and bowing to us and all. And it was so uncomfortable because that is, not what we were looking for at all. We just wanted to be helpful. And so when we got home from the trip, I was probably a week or two later, Seth sent us a picture, and it was a picture of the well and the little village there. All the people were standing around it, and there's a sign over it with our names on it. And they spell John's name the Cambodian way, Jhon.
But the cost of that well was essentially just, almost like a utility bill for us. It was next to nothing. And
It
so
wasn't that much, really.
And it was sort of one of those serendipitous things that happened. We stumbled into this opportunity to leave something behind that was helpful to the community. And, we do try to do that wherever we go, if, whether it's something pre-planned or we just, look for those opportunities. That's something we try to do.
Another time we had done a fundraiser while we were on the air, and we took medicine and clothing and toys and money to an orphanage in Nairobi, Kenya. And, they were devastated because of AIDS for many, many years. And we personally took it in a bunch of suitcases and to that orphanage and got to meet the kids and the children there and all. And that was another great experience. So we do speak about our travels a lot and certainly write the book and that kind of thing. And we always encourage people to look for something that you can leave behind. It doesn't have to be, thousands of dollars or anything. There are things that you can find that you can do. A great way to find something would be with a tour guide. Tour guides know what's needed and where and that sort of thing. And so we strongly encourage that, because certainly as an American, many can afford it. If you're traveling, you can afford it. And you're benefiting from this country that you thought enough of to go visit. And a lot of times, the people in these countries are not necessarily living all that well. Always makes me feel kind of bad, frankly, that we're getting the best of their country and they're not. And so in any event, that is something that we often do when we travel, or when we travel, we look for things. And when we speak to people and all, we encourage people to try to do something while you travel.
Yeah. And listen, and I think that's wonderful. I think more people should be doing things like that if you can. And honestly, I think we could even boil things down even simpler and just say, I think in a lot of places, even just genuine human kindness and touch and, even just a sense of humanity can go a long way. And you can really, you can change someone's day. You could change someone's life, but just by a simple gesture. And it doesn't, if you have the means to do something, like you said, even giving these people a well so they have fresh water did not cost very much. You probably could have gone out for a nice meal in the States for the same price or whatever.
Sure.
But even if that's not within your means, I think there's something that a lot of travelers, I'm not going to say most, but I think a lot of travelers miss out on by not engaging more and just having real human connection with people, especially when you're in another country. Maybe you're afraid of the language barrier or whatever it is. But you know what? I'll tell you, humanity and compassion can overcome language. You can have a conversation with someone without saying words that you understand.
Absolutely.
It can happen. So
when we hiked the Himalayas, which we did to see Mount Everest, and it was 4 days. We did not do base camp or anything like that. We're not that hardy, but we did hike. It was hard. And we had a guide named Prem, and it was just John and me and Prem. And for 4 days of hiking. And he didn't speak much English at all, but he spoke enough to tell us where we needed to go and what we needed to do. And if he thought that I was in any kind, I did fall. I tumbled down Namche Hill and hurt myself. I've got a scar to this day from it.
Great souvenir, though.
It is my favorite
Absolutely.
souvenir. And so he would reach out his hand if he thought that there was any inkling that I might lose my footing or not be sure of myself or whatever. He would just put his hand out for me, and it's so that I would take it and he would help me. And I often think about that. What a wonderful gesture for him to take care of me. And we've often said, and in the book we write about it, and again it brought tears to my eyes in even writing about it, that here we are, these two Americans and this Nepalese man, and he took care of us, really good care of us for 4 days. We put our lives in his hands, and he was so sweet. And I so loved it. That's another story, another thing we talk about, that trip actually, we independently chose our favorite trips, made a list, and that we both picked as our all-time favorite trip out of about 100 trips together at that time. And because it was so meaningful, it was beautiful, and hard and rewarding that we could do it, and just love the experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, honestly, to have traveled so many places, seen so many incredible things, but again, just like coming back full circle, which I mean, that's how we got here, I guess. But just having someone had some impact on you, and obviously what you saw, or what you accomplished as well. But and not to go back to Cambodia, not to stay there, but I just want to mention too, because you also mentioned that this man who you had no idea who he was allowed you into his home.
Mm-hmm.
And I've thought about this before, and we've also mentioned this on the pod, but like in America, just imagine some strangers from another country who really don't speak your language. They even through an interpreter say, "Can I come into your home?"
Yeah.
Most of us are going to say, "I don't think so. Not today."
Most of us wouldn't open the door.
Right. But people in so many other countries, and I'm not everywhere, I'm sure, but so many other places are so welcoming. I've heard stories of people just not only just being invited into a home, but people being cooked a meal and meeting an entire family. And I mean,
absolutely,
the things that can happen just having a conversation are just beautiful.
We have that experience from Ireland.
Back in 22, we took a trip to Ireland, specifically to be there for St. Patrick's Day in Dublin, but also because my ancestry goes back to Ireland. I did a little sort of pre-trip searching for cinnamons, and I found a woman who her maiden name was Cinnamon, lived very close to where my ancestry goes back to, a small town just south of Belfast. So I had gotten in touch with her prior to the trip through email and asked if I could meet and maybe meet in some a local pub, one of their favorite pubs or a restaurant or something like that, a neutral place. And she said yes, and just let us know when you're in the country and we'll make arrangements. So when we were a couple of days out, we were already in Ireland. I contacted her and said, "Hey, we're here. We're going to be in town here in a couple of days. So if you want to meet somewhere, let us know your favorite local Irish bar and we can meet there." She got back and said, "Well, how would you like to come to our house?" Wow. Okay. Here's the perfect example as you were talking to. Here's these people from America who were complete strangers, I could be making up the story about our ancestry, but she said, "Sure, come to our house." And we did. And she and her husband were the loveliest couple.
Archie was his name, and he made tea sandwiches for us and scones and coffee. And Archie and I sat there and chatted each other up and got to know each other while we're having our tea sandwiches. And John and Joan started going through all the ancestry stuff to see if they were related.
It turns out we were not related, but it was still just a
Wonderful.
wonderful experience. And again, a perfect example of someone in another country, at least we spoke the same language, but complete strangers being invited into their home.
They were lovely.
I love it so much. I love it. Do you have any, just on the same sort of note, do you have people that you've met along the way in all of your travels that you still keep in touch with today that you would never have met them had you not traveled to these
Absolutely.
places?
We have a handful of tour guides. We had a tour guide that we traveled with in Jordan. His name is Ayman. We're still in touch with him via Facebook. We had
And we do communicate with him. We did a Facebook Live thing one time during COVID, and because he got shut down, his business was.
Sure.
And so we actually put him on from Jordan and chatted with him for a while. He was great.
Yeah, we did the same thing with a tour guide we had in Turkey. His name was Recep, and we did a Facebook Live talk to him during COVID as well.
And then we took the Trans-Siberian Railway, as we've already mentioned. There was a British guy, or should I say bloke, and he was the only other man in our group. We had a group of 12,
16.
Yeah. And they were from all over. Some were British, some were Australian. There were a couple of, our tour guide was Russian, and an assistant guide was Russian. And so they were pretty much, we were from all over the place. And he was the only other man besides John. So he was thrilled that there was another guy. and he had such a sense of humor. And so we buddied up with him, and then he started rooming with us on the train, and we've kept in touch. We comment on his posts and he on ours, and we're going back to England next year, and we're going to hook up with him to see him after, quite a few years that we haven't seen him. But what a character. And
There you go.
we just love that. And I think that is the real joy, part of the real joy of travel, because, you're meeting these people and you think they're very different, and they're not. People are people.
Exactly.
That is the sort of the theme of our documentary, that people are people. And we all have the same kind of hopes and desires for our families. They may be scaled back a bit in some places or scaled up in others or whatever, but we still have the same kinds of human needs and wants and that sort of thing. And
Shout it from the rooftops, Anne.
Yeah.
Shout it from the rooftops.
And, we certainly, like we have stories from China as well, where, that's supposed to be our foe. Well, the government may be, but the people are not.
This was a
Yes.
great example, going back to, the language barrier, where you're in a place where you don't have a shared language. And so we were in Tiananmen Square on a sunny, warm April afternoon, on a Sunday afternoon, and it was just chock full of Chinese tourists and families having picnics and taking pictures and doing whatever. And here we were, a couple of Americans.
John is 6'3", so he stands out amongst the Chinese.
So it comes. Yes.
And so we became surprisingly popular. There were a couple of Chinese guys who didn't speak English, but through hand gestures and smiles, and that they said they essentially wanted me to take their picture in front of the Forbidden City. So I did, and that was a great example. And then there was a woman that cornered Anne.
She comes over and she has her phone on a selfie stick, and she, kind of gives me a motion like, I assume she wanted to get her picture taken with me. So I posed, and then all of a sudden she starts moving me around like crazy. And it went on for quite some time. And I'm like, what in the world is going on here? I was laughing. I didn't care. And we stop. She stops and gives me the 1 minute signal and does something on her phone and then plays it back. She made a music video out of it that she and this American, in Tiananmen Square. And there were, and all these families and all were coming over to us wanting to get their pictures with us. We have pictures of whole families, little guys that were, holding up the peace sign and that kind of thing to us. And so it was just a wonderful welcoming kind of situation
And
that
all
we
of
didn't expect.
and all of that essentially without a spoken word. It was all, hand gestures and smiles, and
Yeah.
And
it
isn't
was
it
great.
amazing to think that we're talking about this today? How many people that you were in contact with in some form there probably still tell the same story in their
Yeah.
own way? Do you remember when that really tall guy and that lady came here? And uh,
Yeah,
that's
the lanky American that let us take his picture.
I was hoping you would say one of them asked to like sit on your shoulders or something just to get the view. But it's funny because I have a story, and I don't mean to take away from you guys, but I have a story
Oh,
on one of my episodes of someone who went to Japan, and they were in a karaoke bar, and it was a very small place, and this group of guys were there, and basically they had a conversation through song, and it got to a point where, because they didn't speak the same language, somehow it got communicated that the Japanese gentleman knew a song by the Backstreet Boys, and so they all ended up singing together. And just
that's
like I
great.
get chills thinking about that. I just think how much fun that would be
Oh,
for
yeah,
something like that to happen.
sure.
So
Well, let's tell her Ecuador.
Yeah, we had gone to the Galapagos Islands, and we were back in Quito, Ecuador, and we went out for dinner one night, and we hailed a cab to get back to the hotel. As the cab rolled up, the driver was playing some kind of music that was clearly, Latin music, local music, whatever. Well, as we got in the car and we told him what hotel we needed to go to, he clearly realized that we were Americans. So as we were getting in the car, he took out whatever CD he was playing and put in what he assumed would be the quintessential American music for us to listen to for the ride back. It was the Eagles' Hotel California. So he starts playing it, and not only was he playing it for us, when the lyrics started, he started singing along.
And
So
then we started
so we were
singing.
all singing along. We're driving through, Quito, Ecuador, singing "Welcome to the Hotel California," and then he dropped us off at the hotel.
And he didn't want us to get out. He wanted to finish the song. He was like, trying to make us stay. And we're like, we gotta go. And we were still singing as we left, and he was still singing as he drove off. And it was
that
just
was
so
funny.
cool.
Have you noticed sometimes, like depending on the country, but I've noticed in many, not many, but a handful of countries I've been to, I feel like if I get into like an Uber or whatever form of Uber that they have, when I guess maybe when they realize, or maybe when they're getting a lot of Americans that are coming through, they play like a lot of 80s pop music or something like that,
Yes.
or maybe some classic rock. And I
Sure.
for a while I thought, well, maybe that's just what they think we want to hear. But I've also found out that a lot of countries really enjoy our 80s music. And so I was like, okay,
Right.
that's cool. I don't particularly enjoy 80s music, but
We're over it, but you can like it.
yeah.
We were just
Absolutely.
we were just in Puerto Rico not long ago and got in an Uber, and he had Sinatra playing.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a change.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's amazing the things you learn by being in somebody else's space.
Yeah.
When you're thinking they're going to be one way and they're not that way at all, or they're very friendly, welcoming, and well, certainly in the travel industry, they want us to be there,
Sure. Yes.
and so they need to be friendly and nice. But when you're getting that kind of reaction from people that are letting us in their houses, that kind of thing, it's pretty nice. And but that has also been my lesson. I think that I learned back in Iran that people really do like Americans.
Yeah.
And in Iran, I met so many people that wanted to meet me, wanted to get to know me because I was American, and they wanted to get their improve their English by just hanging out with me or talking to me or whatever. I had this guy that called our apartment accidentally. And I answered, hello, because they say hello, but he starts rattling off Farsi, and I'm like, I don't, speak Farsi. And he went, English? And I said, yeah. And he didn't speak much English, but enough that I got the gist. And he sort of asked me where I'm from, and he was, whatever, and he was trying to communicate with me, and I got the feeling that he was trying to learn English, and he asked me if he could call me back. And so, today would I say yes? Of course not. It's certainly not there. But I did. I said, "Sure." I was bored. And so he started calling me. And finally, and his English is getting better, and he would call on occasion. And then finally, he invited my husband and myself to dinner. And so
Oh
we
my
thought, "Well, what the heck?
gosh.
Why not?" So we did. We went to dinner. And we enter this room, and of course, we're the only Americans in there in this restaurant. And all of a sudden, this unbelievably handsome older gentleman in a white suit stands up, and it was him. And of course, his name was Mohammed.
Oh my.
And he was just such a nice man, and I mean really handsome, because the Iranians are. And so then we became friends, and we invited him to our apartment for dinner, and all kinds of stuff, and all because of a wrong phone number, and he wanted to get to know Americans.
Awesome. And no worries, John. You are really, really handsome. So you got that one.
Yeah.
Well, and he was older. He was an older man.
Yeah, right. So, and there's a difference there. So
Yeah.
no, I think that's absolutely beautiful. And I think something else, this, like, we don't need to teach lessons on this podcast, whatever, but it keeps happening all the time. But I want to say, like, for an example of what I want to say is, don't be afraid to ask questions of people, because again, they're just human beings, and we have our differences but our similarities, and it's okay to ask something. And we were in, once upon a time, I think we were traveling from Prague to Germany, and we had a pretty long, I think it was like a 3 hour, I think they were called Bolts instead of an Uber. So we had like a 3 hour Bolt ride, and my wife and daughter sat in the back. I sat in the front with the driver, and he and I chatted the entire ride. And I was asking him questions about what do they think about America? What do they think about our politics? And man, how are things here? And like, we had just a fantastic conversation. And it's so easy to be, especially in like a cab ride or something like that, and throw on headphones or open your phone, or even if you just stare out the window, but you have an opportunity. And so why not take advantage of it? And people, I think, most of the time are very happy to share.
Absolutely.
That has happened to us countless times. A quick one was our cab. He was kind of a transfer driver when we went to Kyiv, Ukraine, back in 2018. And turns out, again, you strike up a conversation. You don't just sit there and be mute. You strike up a conversation with these people. This guy had been a cab driver in New York. He was from Ukraine, but had lived in America for a while as a cab driver in New York. He was back in Ukraine, and he was talking about, and again, this is 2018. He, at the time, was very pro-Putin. He wanted, this is one guy in Ukraine who wanted
Putin to control Ukraine.
Yeah.
He wanted him to take it over.
It was a really fascinating conversation.
Yeah.
With
and who knew? Just a few years later, right, what happened, We've had conversations with many tour guides. One was in Rwanda, and we were having lunch at Hotel Rwanda, which is where they
made the movie about.
Yeah.
Right. Great movie.
Yes, very good movie. That same hotel. And we're having lunch with our guide after we had done touring, and we did guerrilla trekking there. And he wanted to talk about, this was 2016, and he wanted to talk about the election. So that was Trump and Hillary Clinton. And he wanted to know all about it. How did you get those two people? And because he had heard, negatives about both.
We asked the same question.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Without getting political on here, so he was wondering, how did this happen? And what is your take on it? He wanted to know what we thought. And we had a long conversation with him about it. Had a similar conversation with our Russian guide on the Trans-Siberian Railway. She wanted to know all about it. And of course, it was a few years later, but she wanted to know about it. And they all do, because things that happen in the United States affect them. Down the road, somewhere, it affects them.
Yeah. Yeah, and in a way, I mean, our politics and such have, I think, has always had an effect on the world because
Hmm.
of who we are and the power that we have. So, listen, in the interest of time, before we get to our final five questions, I'd love to ask you just about a few more places. And I don't
Sure.
have anywhere specific, but I'd like to maybe ask you, I guess, something more along the lines of when you are sitting down and telling stories, we're sitting in a bar, maybe having a beer, or maybe we're having a coffee, whatever your drink of choice is. And
Wine.
Yeah.
okay, and some red.
No, white.
Gosh darn it, I gotta stop guessing things. I'm always wrong, Ants. I'm always wrong. But what's like if you could think of maybe a couple of like the funniest and craziest experiences that you've ever had that you just have to tell when you're telling your stories.
Well, one certainly is as we were preparing for the Trans Siberian Railway, we had already been to Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan. So we were flying from Uzbekistan to Moscow. We fly into Moscow, we get to the airport, and we're going through passport control. And for some unknown reason, this one time we chose different lanes for passports. Anne was in one line, I was in the other. I get up there, they take my passport, they look at it, they look at me, look back at the passport, and told me to step aside. And I didn't know what was going on. By this time, Anne was already through, and I saw her, and I kind of gave it the to get her attention. She turned around, I gave her a shrug, like, I don't know what's going on, but they're not letting me through yet. Well, they had me cool my heels for about 45 minutes at least, and then eventually led me downstairs to a basement office, windowless, and questioned me. Why are you here? How long are you going to be here? Are you going to be talking to any politicians? And this was more than a little unnerving because I didn't know what really was going on, how long it was going to last. Anne didn't know how long it was going on because she made it through, but her phone was dead and I had the charger. So we couldn't even text each other to say, hey, I'm doing this or whatever. And they actually, at one point, took my phone, punched
They
it.
ask you if they could take it.
Yeah, they asked
What
if
were
I
you
had a
gonna
phone.
say?
Yeah, I'm gonna say no. So I give them my phone. They punched in some numbers on the screen, and a screen came up that I had never seen before. It was apparently the serial number. They wrote it down. So apparently they were going to track our movements
They
for the
probably
whole
followed-
time.
I'll bet they followed us the whole trip.
Yeah. And there was never any explanation as to why they held me. It was of all the people that came in that day, at least on that plane, there was me and I think two other guys that appeared to be together. And frankly, they looked like they were of Middle Eastern descent. But other than that, it was just me and them. And there was no real explanation as to why I was pulled aside.
Well, so I'm on the outside and I'm panicking. I'm standing there, I can see him for a while, and then all of a sudden these metal doors come down and they've closed off passport control because there's no more planes coming in at that moment. And so some guy comes by with a uniform on, and I grabbed him, and he pulled out his phone or a translator or whatever, and said, "What do you want? What do you need? Whatever." And I said, "Why are you holding my husband? Why are you keeping him?" And he takes the phone and looks at it, and he punches his answer and shows it to me, and it says, "Because it is necessary." That's not an answer. And so I go down and I pick up our luggage, and I came back up and I sat and waited. I mean, it was a couple hours. And I'm sitting there, I'm very, very close to making this pact with God that if you please let him out right now, I'll never drag him around the world again. and and sure enough, a little while later, out he appears. And to this day, we don't really know what happened, but I have a theory, and that is that he was this male man, a man from America. He's an American by himself getting off a Uzbekistan Airways flight that has CIA written all over it.
Wow.
I'll bet you anything.
Thank goodness you were close to making a pact with God because that would have
Yeah.
really ruined a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah. So clearly she did not make that pact because she's still dragging me around the world.
I don't think she's dragging, though. I have a feeling it's
There's
willing.
no kicking or screaming. However, I do come up with ideas sometimes, and I do get eye rolls. There are definitely eye rolls.
Well, after 30 years,
Yeah. Well, I get eye rolls for other reasons too. Yeah, some harebrained scheme I come up with to go somewhere, and then I usually go a step too far, and that might have been a step too far.
My gosh, that's incredible. Absolutely incredible. I don't even know because, like, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, maybe you could call like the consulate or something. But again, you didn't have a phone.
I didn't have a phone, and and what's running through my mind is this is somewhere where people disappear,
Yes. Right.
and they don't need a reason. Even though he, is an innocent American, and he's a tourist about to get on the Trans-Siberian Railway. They might have, who knows? And the longer it went, the more I really did get scared. It scared me. Of course, now we talk about it, we laugh about it and joke and whatever, but it was a very frightening ordeal.
Well, that is one of our travel slogans. It's better to have a good story than a good time.
Yeah, and honestly, we've found that through all the stories that I've heard on here too. Now, being over a year into this, that sometimes some of the most impactful stories are the ones that are a little bit harrowing, kind of stand out, and sometimes it's harder to remember and recollect like full details of the really nice moments that when you try to describe them, it's just a lackluster story because you can't describe feelings that well.
Yeah,
So
because you're not in the moment, and
Right.
and we have and there's another one and this was John's fault too. Um, we were in
at least you're really, really handsome.
Yeah, there's a theme here.
We were in Pamplona for Running of the Bulls, and we had a rental car, and it was one of the days that we had actually been to the Running of the Bulls, and went back and got our car from the hotel. And I think we were going in to try to change money or do something, and then because I know we were going to go to a bullfight, which we did. Awful. Glad we did it, but never again. And so we were trying to find a bank. And so we went around the block, and he's getting really frustrated driving, which happens all the time in Europe. And he drives into this place where it very clearly said, "Do not enter." And it was
I
because
might have even said it in English, and I still disregarded it.
yeah, and it's because of Running of the Bulls, and there's a gazillion people there for it, and so they didn't want people driving in there, but he did anyway. And as he did it, I said, "What are you doing?" And I looked in the rearview mirror, and sure enough, there's a police car behind us, all lit up, and they pull us over, and we get out. Well, actually, the one guy, they didn't speak. There were several of them, and they didn't speak much English. And the guy comes up to the window and asks to see his license. And he pulls out his Indiana driver's license. We neglected to get a international driver's permit that time. We usually do, but we forgot or didn't do it. And the guy looks at this Indiana driver's license and he goes, "This is no good." And we went, okay. And he starts calling his other people over, and they're chatting it up, and he starts making moves like he's gonna have us get out and
Impound the car and everything.
And so I get out. I don't speak Spanish. All I could think of is "por favor," and I kept saying "por favor, por favor." And so the one that spoke the best English says, where you go from here?" And I said, "France, tomorrow," which was the plan. And so in broken English, he says, "All right, take your car back to the hotel and don't drive it again while you're here." And John, in the meantime, is in there. He's packing up.
I absolutely thought this was it. They were going to impound the car. So I'm pulling out our maps. I'm pulling out the GPS. I'm gathering all of our worldly possessions that are in the car because I know that we're going to lose the car.
And I'm begging, and it worked. Begging works. Let me just throw that out there. Begging nicely works. And so we also have a theory about that. There's thousands of people in Pamplona. Most of them are drunk.
Right.
And so they did not want to deal with a couple of Americans who didn't have an international driver's permit
No, they're going to
because
be
of all the
busy.
paperwork. They didn't want to deal with us. So they just let us go.
And not only that, but I wonder if so I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we pick on Cleveland, Ohio all the time. And I think that would be like if somebody did the same thing here and they were like, we're going to Cleveland tomorrow, we'd be like, all right, go be Cleveland's problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
They can have you.
Exactly. Go to France. Get out of here.
They can have you. Yes.
That's right. So that's another one that I never let him live down.
Oh my gosh. I have one more kind of oddball question before we get to the final five. And this just came to my mind because one of my favorite things of international travel has always been to get that stamp in my passport. And I just traveled to New Zealand for my first time out of the country in
Cool.
a couple of years.
It's
And
beautiful.
it was absolutely gorgeous. And
Yep.
what I didn't know is now with all this new technology, when you go through the automated passport control stations, obviously you get no more stamp. And so I
Right.
had gone through the automated just because that's what everyone was doing. And so when I walked down the hall a little bit, I encountered a woman that was there and I asked her, do you still do the stamps? And she said, yes, but if you went through the automated, I can't give it to you. And I have a brand new passport. And I was so heartbroken, but I couldn't get the passport. And I'll probably never say never, but I went to visit my daughter and she won't be living there after probably this summer.
Wow.
What are your favorite stamps in your passports?
Probably visas, the ones you work really hard for, like China and
And
Russia
Russia.
and Bhutan and some of
How many
those.
of those?
Yeah. And we were on such a tear that at one point I had to send my passport in for more pages.
Oh, I
I had
believe
to
that.
actually have pages added to my passport. But
Wow.
now that won't be a problem apparently
They
anymore.
have the bigger ones now. Yeah, right.
And well, and
Yeah.
you
Oh,
don't
wow. Plus, you
necessarily.
won't have stamps. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ugh.
I think our last year we
Yeah.
didn't get a stamp.
Yeah.
Somewhere. But oh yeah, there's some really good ones. I go through and I occasionally and I'll look at the stamps and it'll bring back a memory. Might
Yes.
even remember what the reaction was, from somebody because some people are really friendly and others won't even look at you. And we've had a few rude ones when we've gotten back to the states on occasion, and and have been tempted to say we just traveled all over the world and everybody was really nice until we got home. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know maybe you don't enjoy your job. Maybe you should find something else to do.
Yes, exactly. I hope you're not treating tourists that way because you want to be
Yeah, no
welcoming.
kidding. So, okay, well, we're just about at that hour mark. Is there any last like story or memory that you definitely want to share before we move on to the final five? Like
Yes.
you'd be remiss, I guess I would say.
Yes. Yes. We have a favorite day. In our whole lives, we have a favorite day. And I'm really proud that we have that because it means something to have a favorite day. And I encourage anyone who doesn't have a favorite day that they can point to that they should go attempt to get a favorite day. It's a worthy goal to have a favorite day.
If you remember in the movie City Slickers, at one point they're riding along and say, what's your best day? What's your best day? Well, we have this best day, and it happens to be January 1st, 2008. We were on Easter Island, the most remote inhabited island in the world, South Pacific, the place where the moai are, the big giant stone heads. And that particular day, we rented a scooter and rode all around the island. Now, this was, again, 2008. So there was not a whole lot of tourism there back then. In fact, I think there were only 2 flights a week to the island. And I don't think cruise ships were going there yet. So there were very few people there. And it was just the 2 of us on this scooter. It was like we were the last people on Earth. And it was magical. It was mystical. It was wonderful.
We just absolutely loved it.
And we could just ride along this little highway. On the one side, you got the Moai stone heads. On the other side is the Pacific. And
Craggy beaches, because it had volcanoes, and so there's all the lava on the beaches and that kind of thing. And it's not what you would typically think of as a Pacific island. It's very different. It, like I said, craggy, but so authentic. And just a beautiful place. People are going a little bit more now. I actually have clients that I booked to go there, and they loved it. Absolutely loved it. And cruise ships are stopping there occasionally too. But it's just a beautiful island in its own way, in a rough sort of uh, way, and it was just a wonderful day.
And was that sort of like when you set out on that day, was it sort of just like, that's what we're going to do? We're just going to rent a scooter. We're going to ride around.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have so many questions. How long does it take to ride, like the length? How big is Easter Island? And what did you do? Did you like just,
It's very small, and we drove from one end to the other in maybe a half an hour, 45 minutes, something like that. But
gosh.
that's would be without stopping. Obviously, we
Yes.
stopped along the way and examined these. Some of the moai, some standing, some have fallen. It was just we
Drove up
spent.
to a volcano, and that was really lots of scree. That worried me a little bit on a scooter, and then back down again. But yeah, we rode all over, and
just stopped
yeah,
when you wanted to stop? And
exactly. It was just that. And no, we didn't set out to do that necessarily. We just wanted to see the island on our own. Scooters were one of the big ways to do that. So, this guy shows up on New Year's morning with a scooter, and it was bigger than we thought it was going to be. And I'm like, okay, are we really checked out on this? And John gets on. I got a picture of him on it, trying to look tough, and he rode around the parking lot a bit, to try to get used to it and whatever. And pretty soon I hop on the back and off we go. And then I drove it a few times too. And so it was not our intent to have the best day ever. It just happened, which is serendipity, and it's the best way for things to happen.
yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And the one thing I'll touch on when you said scooter is, and I think this is something people should take note of, is no matter where you are, if you have the time to do it, instead of riding in a cab or an Uber or whatever, stay out of vehicles and either get a bike, a scooter, or best case scenario, if you can be on foot, because otherwise you miss out on so much. First of all, things fly by too fast. You just can't see, you can't see out the roof necessarily. And again, like I said earlier, you miss out on the sounds and the smells, and that really ties everything together. And so
Something I love is knowing how a major city of the world feels. And you don't get that unless you're walking. So we have walked, you name a city in the world, we have walked it. There was a day in Shanghai that I think we clocked 20 miles. And we just walked and walked and walked, and it was great. But that is what we do. We walk everywhere because that is the best way to see things, because you're going to miss stuff. You don't want to ride around in a city like Rome. Rome, you can't swing a cat without hitting a ruin. And if you're driving by it, you can't see it. But if you're walking, you see all these ruins. There's where Caesar was killed, which was just, recently, the Ides of March and all this kind of stuff. And
Well, he was killed like 2,000 years ago. Not so it wasn't that recently, but
the Ides of March for it. Yeah.
smart aleck.
I heard about
Anyway.
that on CNN.
Yes. So, in any event, if you don't walk, you're going to miss so much stuff. So, totally agree with you on that. And that is what we do.
Even little things, like sometimes there's like, we were in Venice, and obviously you have to walk in Venice, but this is just an example of on the stone paths, there's little signs on the floor, on the ground, with signs from the Holocaust and things like that. And it's like, if you're not paying attention, or and get a guide too when you can, because they can give you so much information and knowledge that you would never have. And cathedrals, gosh, I just love cathedrals and churches, and I'm not a religious person necessarily, but just to be walking by and all of a sudden you look down the street and there's this beautiful old church that was built in the 1700s or even older, and just to stop and go inside. And anyway, I could go on.
Well, it's the architecture.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Amazing. And that's what you're looking at. And then normally there's inside, they have spared no expense to, gold and artwork. And there's famous artwork in Venice in the churches.
Mhm.
I mean, like famous artists. And yeah, it's you don't have to be religious to appreciate
Appreciate it.
the
Yep.
beauty of a building.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's do this. Let's jump into the final 5 questions. First of all, let me just say this has been an absolute blast, and I feel like maybe sometime down the road we should do this again because obviously we haven't touched on a millionth of the experiences that you guys have had.
And between now and then, we'll
We're
have
gonna keep going. Exactly right. So we'll do the final 5 questions, and feel free to expand as much as or as little as you'd like. And
Okay.
some of these maybe you each have different answers. I don't know. We'll see. So
Okay. All right.
question number 1, we didn't really talk about food at all, I don't think.
Oh, yeah.
But my first question is, and I phrase the question carefully, I say this every time, is of all of the places in the world that you've ever been, and I hope you haven't heard the questions because I hope, especially with your experiences, whatever jumps to mind. So of all the places that you've been in the world, what's your favorite or a couple meal experience that you've ever had?
I'll go first.
Go ahead.
Zanzibar. So we went to Zanzibar after an Indian Ocean cruise, and there is the town on Zanzibar is Stone Town, and it's awesome. And there are two experiences there. One in Stone Town, we were looking for a restaurant, and we went in this place, and it couldn't see anything. Had to take your shoes off. They let us into this room that was closed off, and inside it was kind of dark, and they had local music. And by music, I mean, this is Tanzania. So it had a very exotic African sort of flair or whatever. We sat on the floor to eat, and the food was amazing. I just absolutely loved that experience. Then the other one was also Zanzibar. We went to a resort and stayed for a few days. And the one night they had dinner on the beach. And so you sit at little tables right on the beach, tons of people, and they had all this like buffet, whatever, which, is fine. But they had a sailfish that obviously had just been caught, and it was hanging on a hook, and you'd go over and you go point to it that you want the sailfish, and they would take a knife, cut off a slab of it, throw it on the grill, and then hand it to you on a plate. And it was the best fish, seafood, whatever I've ever had in my life, right out of the Indian Ocean. And they're literally cutting it off right there as I'm watching. It was absolutely amazing. And then that night they had music, they had a band. And this is not the first or last time we've had this experience. They played Hotel California. And so, of course, we had to get up and dance.
It all comes together.
It does.
Mine was a Mediterranean cruise, probably around 2008 or 9, something like that. And if you've ever been on a cruise, you can eat yourself silly on the ship. You do not want for food on the ship. But one of the stops was in Rhodes, and we were touring Rhodes, and we found this little cafe and thought, wow, let's have some baklava. So we got warm baklava a la mode, and it was absolutely the best dessert we have ever experienced.
And it was during a thunderstorm. And it just out of nowhere started raining. And so we took shelter in this place and stood there eating it while we watched the rain. And then it stopped, and it was like a sign, okay, now we can leave. Best dessert ever.
I love it so much. I love it so much. And I also love the idea of nice warm baklava.
It's the best.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I say this every time too. Question number 2 is probably one of my favorites just for the diversity of the answers. And some people don't have one, and that's okay. But of all of the places in the world that you have been, even if I was to say to you, either Anne or John or both, here's a free trip, go have fun, you would say, no, thank you. I do not want to go back.
Ooh. I think we've kind of had that experience because being in the travel business, you get fams and whatever. And it's like, I don't I don't want to go there. And if we've already been somewhere, I would have to maybe go with somewhere like Malaysia or I mean, I hate to say that. Or even I'm going to have to say India or Sri Lanka because they're just so crowded and traffic and whatever. So glad, and I always say this. I am not sorry for anywhere I've been, but there are places like that I would not go back.
I would tend to agree with all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, it doesn't have to be a bad experience. And I've had people just say, listen, I would go back almost anywhere, but I've been to Vegas, for example, and I just don't need to do it again.
Well, okay. See, I was thinking exotic international.
Oh, yeah. No, it could be anywhere, but yeah.
Yeah. And no, thank you to Vegas. Vegas is the fakest place on earth.
Oh,
Cleveland. Yes. I'll never go back to Cleveland.
There you go. You just went over some people and we lost theirs. Wonderful. Excellent. Thank you. And so, all right, question number 3, we'll flip it around. And I make this very difficult. I'm sorry to do that. Of all the places in the world that you have been, let's say you can only go back to 1 or 2 of those places that you've been. Where are those 1 or 2 places you absolutely have to return to?
In very general terms, Italy. I can't get enough of Italy.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't go wrong. Frankly, we've been there. We've been to Rome probably 7 times. We've been inside the Colosseum 3 times. It never gets old. I mean, well, because it's already old. But it is always great.
And every time you go, you find something new, or they found something new that's old new. And each time we go, we'll try to see some other wonderful site outside of Rome or wherever. I mean, we've been all over the country, and it's just our favorite country to visit. So I would say, and someday that's going to be our new way of traveling. We're going to go and stay somewhere for a while,
like for a month or 2.
Yeah.
That will be the number one place to go. There will be others that we will want to do, but that would be number 1.
Yeah. And you know what? It's funny you say that. Not funny, but I think because part of my sort of mindset is there's so much more of the world that I need to see. Not need to, but really want to see, that there's not a lot of places that I will probably go back to. But I've been to Italy only twice, and I've seen maybe 6 different regions. But there's still so much more to see of Italy. And you're right.
Absolutely.
Every single bit of it that I've seen is so beautiful.
Yep.
People are wonderful. The food is absolutely incredible.
Yep.
And so, yeah. And I will probably go back to Rome. I will definitely visit Venice again. Even Milan. They're just beautiful, beautiful places.
Yeah.
So I agree.
Cinque Terre.
I haven't been there yet.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Amalfi Coast. The Amalfi Coast is absolutely the most beautiful coastline in the world. And it's not too far from Pompeii, which is probably my favorite archaeological site, or certainly one of them. It's just so cool. You're walking into somebody's home that lived 2,000 years ago. It's like, makes your head spin.
Yeah. And I think basically that is probably my next trip to Italy. So
That's
awesome. Okay. Moving along, question number 4 is, again, of all the places, flipping, of all the places that in the world that you have never been, which there's a small list of those, but of all the places in the world you've never been, and again, if you could only get to 1 or 2 of them, what are those 1 or 2 you have to get to?
Well, it's real easy for this one because we've attempted to go twice now, and each time it's been canceled. Saudi Arabia. Have not been there, and they have opened up more to tourism in recent years, and in fact, they're doing a lot of building and infrastructure for tourism. And it's been it was 2020, COVID, and we had a trip all arranged. COVID happened, we couldn't go, so we were supposed to leave in a week to go to Saudi Arabia. Then we were going to Sharm el Sheikh, Egypt. We were going to climb Mount Sinai at sunrise and then end in Abu Dhabi. Well, guess what? We had to cancel because of what's going on in that part of the world at the moment as we speak. And so That is twice now. Maybe I'm not intended to go there, but I really not only do I want to see Riyadh, Jeddah, and that sort of thing, but they have the sister city to Petra. And Petra is that city in Jordan that was carved out of stone. It's featured in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade at the end.
Mm-hmm.
That's the treasury building from Petra that they show. And they have the sister city that the Nabataeans are the people that built it. And they carved a city in Saudi Arabia as well. And I want to see it. Ruins and that kind of thing are my big thing, the history and whatever. And so maybe someday.
Is that the same for you, John?
The same.
Yeah.
I mean, it literally, again, we've been so fortunate over the last 30 plus years to travel to more than 120 countries. There are so few places that we haven't been.
That we want to go. There are places there are
Right.
places we don't want to go. They're too dangerous.
So Saudi would be it.
Wonderful. Well, the final question that I have is an easy one because you're going to know the answer right off the bat. And that is, where are you going? What's already planned maybe this year, maybe into next year?
We're going to, we're going to Slovenia, Croatia, and Italy.
Slovakia.
Slovenia.
No, it's Slovakia.
That's Slovenia.
We're gonna duke it out here.
That country everybody look on your maps. It's that country just north of Croatia, between Croatia and Italy.
So we have at the last minute put this trip together because we're going now in a month. And because we did get to go to Saudi, what we're going to do is fly into Venice, and then we're going to Ljubljana, which is are you right? Slovenia?
I'm
So-
going to my little map here.
Then we're going to Croatia. We've been to Croatia a couple times actually, but not Zagreb, not Split. So he's right. I stand corrected, or I sit corrected. And so we're doing Zagreb, we're doing Split, which has apparently fabulous Roman ruins, and doing the islands there. Then we're taking a ferry across to San Marino. That's that country that is surrounded by Italy, and it just looks gorgeous. And then from there, taking the train to Bologna. We've not been to Bologna. And then we're going to end in Venice. And so that is in a month. And then in August, we're going back to Tanzania to do the Great Migration in the Serengeti.
Wow.
And we have not done, we've done Tanzania and we've done safaris all over, but not the Great Migration, not in the Serengeti. So we're doing that. We're probably going to hook it up with Namibia because we've not been there either.
Awesome. Well, that just sounds incredible. I'm really jealous. I will say I've been to one place that you guys haven't been. So I've been to Bologna. So, but yes,
Yep. No, we've not been to Bologna.
it's probably the only place. Listen, you guys have been great. Is there anything that you jumped out at you that you definitely want to share, or anything that you just want to add before we hit stop on the episode?
I think we've covered a lot of territory, literally.
But if anyone would like to read about it, you can pick up our book at Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and it is called Travel is No Vacation, A Love Story. And the title comes from all these things we just talked about. It goes wrong, it's hard, it's whatever.
Being held in the Moscow airport, getting pulled over by the Spanish police. And
so real travel is not really a vacation. And so would love for you to pick it up and give it a read.
Yes. And check out the YouTube channel as well. You guys have some great stuff there. And I'll put everything in the show notes as well. So
Great.
I just thank you so much for taking this much time with me. I really appreciate it. And I know our listeners are going to love this. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
We enjoyed it very much. So thank you for having us on, Bill.
And there's another episode of the Where Have You Been podcast in the books. Thank you so much for listening today. It was another great guest with some great stories, as always. And I hope that you will support all of the guests by checking out the show notes and going to their web pages, seeing any socials and projects that they may have going on. And please, again, I'll ask as always to like, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It really does help to allow the podcast to grow and reach more people, and I appreciate you for doing that. Also, if you haven't done so, check out the website, whyvpodcast.com, where you can find blog posts. If you'd like to be a guest, please register to be a guest on the site, and check out the merch page. There's some really cool stuff if you're interested in representing the pod, along with some other cool travel items and apparel that I'm working on every day as well. Join me again next week for another great guest with more incredible stories. New episodes drop every Sunday just after midnight Eastern Time. Until then, thank you for being here, and have a great day.